Okay, so I'm just going to create a 2-bar loop here, just at the 9th bar. I'm just going to minimize our drums, and I'm going to right click and insert a new audio track. I'm just going to rename it Percussion. And then I'm going to browse to our samples folder, and I'm going to drop in the percussion.wav. I'm just going to drag that out across our 2 bars, and if we just make sure our loop is on. Okay, so we're actually just going to find a couple of wee samples inside this percussion loop, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to create just a half a bar loop here, or a quarter of a bar loop, and I'm just going to cycle through the percussion loop that we've got until we find something that is useful. So if I just play this back with a track. Okay, so there's quite a lot of hits in there that we could be using. And as you can see live here, if we just zoom in, it has automatically created transient points for each of these hits. I'm just going to firstly move this first transient hit just to the start of the bar, because we're going to start splitting these up. So if I just Apple and click on this transient point, it's Control and click on a PC. And if I just click it and move it to the start of this bar, and then if I do the same for this last one, and now if I just right click on the percussion audio loop and go to slice to new MIDI track, this will create hit points, or it'll create individual hits for each of these transient points, as long as this create one slice per transient is selected. If you were to select 8th notes, it would split this loop into 8ths, and it would make a hit point for each one of them, but we want it on transient mode. And then if we just click OK, we can now delete this audio track, and we've got a MIDI track now below it with our hits already programmed in, and we've got our 1-bar loop. We can just drag that out, or sorry, it'll be a quarter of a bar loop. And if we drag it out and have a look at what it's created here, so we've got slice 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if we just double click it, you can actually see on the right here that it's actually just cycling through different loop points of the audio file that we were just dealing with, and it's just got a start and an end point for each one. And if we go into the MIDI data that it's given us, you can see slice 1 to 5, and if you just scroll up, that'll play them in order. So we're just going to remove all of these, and we're going to re-sequence it. So we've got all these hits to play with, and we have control of the decay time, release time, sustain, and things like that over on the left hand side here. So if we just play it back with the track, and we'll program in a new loop. I'm just going to set my snap to 16ths. I'm just going to tighten this up by bringing down the sustain of each note. And I'm going to bring the decay time back as well. So I've just got that sort of lightly hitting each of those notes now. What I'm going to do now is do a bit of a high pass on this, just to remove some of the low end on it. And if we just go to an auto filter, drop it onto that track, and if we set it to high pass and just bring the cutoff frequency back a bit. Tidies that up a bit for us, and then I'm going to add just a bit of distortion in the form of bit crush. So we just drop in the redux control and change the down sample. Let's move that to somewhere where I'm happy. And then I'm just going to do a bit of an EQ boost just to bring out the sort of high end of this. Drop in an EQ8, and I'm just going to pick a point, pick point 3 here, and I'll do a boost of about 5 dB, and I'm just going to sweep up and down the frequency until I find somewhere that sounds nice. I think around about the 6 kilohertz range, it really brings this sample out a bit. And you can also widen or shorten the bandwidth of that Q, of the frequency point, by moving this Q around. Just leave it as it is, I think. And then I'm just going to widen this out so that it isn't really interfering with the kick drum, which is sitting in the center of the mix. I want it sort of pan to the left and right speakers, and we can do a trick I covered in one of the previous tech tips in Cubase, but I'll show you how to do it in Ableton here quickly. If we just drag in a simple delay onto the end of this track, and if I just solo this, you'll hear what's going on. I'm going to turn the dry wet control up to 100, and I'm going to turn the sync modes off on each case. I'm going to turn this one right down to 0. Well, 1 millisecond is the shortest we can get. And I'm bring down the right ear. I'm going to set it to about 10 milliseconds. You can experiment with changing this value and you'll get a different result each time. So you can hear with this off, sits in the center, and if you turn it on, it really widens out that sample. And if you move around this dry wet control, it'll also affect how wide that is, but you'll get a wee bit of a phasing issue going on there, just around about the 50% mark. We're just going to stick it right up to 100 so that it is as wide as possible. And then we're going to create a ping pong delay for this. So I'm just going to rename return track B to ping pong, and I'm going to drop in the ping pong delay and turn the dry wet up to 100 because it's a send and return track. I'm just going to send a bit of the signal to this. And we've got this bandwidth control here in the middle, which basically returns only the selected frequency range that you pick here. So if you wanted to return only the low frequencies, you would move this down to the lows, or if you want to return the high frequencies, move it up to the high. We're going to keep it just in the middle, and this bandwidth control is how sharp you want that. So if you wanted it around 2 kilohertz and you only wanted that to come through, you turn that down quite low. You turn it up, you'll start to introduce high frequencies and low frequencies. So we'll keep it quite broad, stick it at about 5 and about 2 kilohertz. So it's in the middle, just extracting all those sort of low mids and low end. I'm just going to turn the feedback down on this to about 48 or so. And then I'm also going to send a bit of this to the reverb. And then I'm just going to bring this actual track down in volume because I just want it to be quite subtle in the background of this drum loop. So that's it with it off. And then that's with it on. Okay, so one final thing I'm going to do is add just a bit of shuffle to the track. So just go to our samples folder, and there is a swing 16 here, which is our shuffle. I'm just going to drop it into our drum loop MIDI file that we created before. And I'll just play it back, and you can hear what that shuffle has actually done, and we're going to just adjust it a wee bit. Okay, so you can hear there that it's quite severe shuffle. We don't want it to be that obvious, so we're going to turn this master groove amount down. And we're going to set it just to about 11 or 12%, just to get a slight shuffle. Just enough to give it a shuffle, but not enough to make it too noticeable. Okay, so that's our drums programmed in. In the next tutorial, we're going to start bringing in some arpeggiated synth lines.